Hey, how's it going everyone? It's David here with the free play mode, and I'm coming at you with the review of a game that some people have said has been 23 years in the making. Is AEW Fight Forever a proper heir to the No Mercy and Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 throne, or is it another game in a long line of unworthy successors that have cropped up over the years, unable to take the crown from a 23-year-old game? Let's get into it. So what we have here is a wrestling game published by THQ Nordic and developed by Yuke's. If that developer name sounds familiar, then it should. They were the developers of the WWE's wrestling games since the very first WWF SmackDown on the original PlayStation. That lasted all the way up until what would be their final effort on behalf of the WWE, which was WWE 2K19. As for AEW, what is AEW? AEW is All Elite Wrestling, an upstart wrestling promotion that started in 2019 off the heels of the successful independent show All In that took place in 2018, which was promoted by independent wrestlers Matt and Nick Jackson, collectively known as the Young Bucks, and Cody Rhodes, the son of legendary wrestler and promoter Dusty Rhodes. The trio were then approached by the owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Khan family, who wanted to act as the primary investors, with Tony Khan being the CEO and president of AEW. This effort comes as a result of a question posed to Kenny Omega, who is a mainstay of the AEW roster. He was asked what kind of wrestling game would he like to see if AEW were to get its own game. Being a noted video game enthusiast, Kenny Omega responded that he thinks wrestling games today have gotten a bit too complex for his liking and would like to see an AEW effort be more in line with the older Aki Asmic style games, i.e. WCW NWO Revenge, WWF WrestleMania 2000, WWF No Mercy, and Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. So as a result, this is what we have here in this package. Not a hardcore wrestling sim, but an arcade-like offering made in the vein of the N64 era of wrestling games. The question is, how does it stack up in today's landscape? So now we're going to talk about the features of the game. This is effectively what you have to look forward to while playing this game. First up immediately are the exhibition modes. These are the match options and other things that you can jump into right away and begin playing. First up is one-on-one. There are three types of one-on-one matches that you can choose from: Standard, Lights Out, and Falls Count Anywhere. Standard is your typical 3 count to a pinfall and submission wins the match type of affair. Rope break, disqualification, and countouts are on in this mode with no option to disable any of them. Lights Out is the AEW's version of an unsanctioned hardcore style match, and Falls Count Anywhere allows for pinfalls to take place anywhere in the arena. Unfortunately, there is no in-crowd interactions, so ringside, ramp area, and up on the stage are the only places where any additional falls can take place. There are no backstage areas to travel to once you get to the stage area like you can in WWF WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy. Next up is 2-on-2. What this is your standard tag team match. Unfortunately, there is no option to do tornado tag matches, so the standard tag team match is the only flavor you have here. The only bonus is that there are no countouts, so extended opportunity to brawl outside the ring, ramp area, and stage areas are a bonus and a plus. 3 and 4-way matches do make their appearance in this game, but again, there are no match modifiers with these modes. There are no options to make these types of matches anything other than first to a pinfall or first to a submission wins the matchup. You can't even do it like ECW and make it a 3-way or 4-way dance, which is an elimination style matchup instead of first to pin or first to submit. Casino Battle Royale is AEW's take on a 21-man battle royal, where the group you enter with in the ring is determined by the suit of the card drawn from a deck of cards, and the position within that group is determined by the denomination of the card. Only the final wrestler enters alone, and that is the person who drew the Joker. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of the engine, this idea is not fully realized, and it comes off simply as a useless preamble to a standard battle royal mode. Perhaps the most interesting match type of all of them is the exploding barbed wire death match. For those who are unfamiliar with this match type, allow me to explain. This match has been a staple of the deathmatch wrestling scene in Japan for decades, with it becoming more commonplace in American promotions over the last 10 to 15 years, even though you see them sparingly used in promotions where hardcore wrestling was a staple, i.e. ECW, CZW, and XPW. Barbed wire is wrapped around the ring ropes, and anytime someone is forced into the ropes, there is an explosion that is supposed to do greater damage to the victim. Lastly, these types of matches have an arbitrary countdown for when the time expires. The ring itself is supposed to explode. It surely is a visual sight, and it is a lot to take in, if not a bit cheesy. The latter match is AEW's version of WWE's Money in the Bank, where the wrestlers fight to grab a giant-sized casino chip that is suspended high above the ring. Unfortunately, this is strictly a one-on-one affair, so more wrestlers cannot be included in this type of match. The mini games mode is a decent diversion, which allows you to play a series of mini games against the CPU or with 4 human players. Up to 3 rounds can be chosen initially, and there are 5 mini games from the start, with more to be unlocked from the game's career mode. Once unlocked, you can select between 10 mini games. The winner of each mini game gets 30 points, and whoever has the most points after the designated amount of rounds wins. Lastly is the training mode. In this mode, you get to test out various wrestlers and practice against a training dummy. It's particularly useful if you plan on playing online, as you cannot pause the game to take a look at your wrestler's moveset. This is especially helpful since your signature and special moves are done in different positions for every wrestler. What's noticeably missing is a match type that is a staple of AEW, and that's their trio style match, which means no trios division or trios title. This is again due to the limitations of the game's engine, because the hardware this game runs on, be it an Xbox Series machine, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, or PC, is more than capable of handling 4 characters on screen at once. This is not the most graphically intensive game, which we'll get into later. Next up for the features is online mode, and there are 3 different options available for online matches: ranked, casual, and private matches. Every match type that is available in local exhibition variety is available to be played online. The downside of ranked matches is that there is no proper matchmaking or filtering system. So in effect, there is no way to play someone of similar experience level or rank. It's all random, and more often than not, it ends up pitting experienced players against inexperienced players, creating a very wide skill gap and experienced players preying on the new players. Hopefully in future updates and patches, there is some sort of matchmaking system implemented on the back end, and the option to filter whom you wish to play on the front end player side. Up next for features is the game's custom mode, which is effectively its creation suite. This is where the bulk of the game's faults and shortcomings lie, in my opinion. It is severely lacking on all fronts. Create a wrestler mode is severely limited. Not only is it impossible to create approximations of wrestlers that exist in the WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and other promotions, it's extremely difficult to create wrestlers that haven't been included in this game so far that have appeared in AEW. This is due to the limited amount of body types, body parts, facial features, facial parts, hairstyles, and other options that have become mainstays in other games like WWE 2K and Fire Pro Wrestling. The inability to do multiple layers for clothing, which prevents you from adding things like designs and lettering, is not acceptable. Also, the inability to place and layer multiple tattoos on different body parts because of the limitation of not only predetermined designs, but predetermined locations for the tattoos on the body itself. That means you can only have one tattoo on the body at a time, which is pretty strange given how many wrestlers are artistical landscapes for their tattoos across their bodies. Finally, assigning moves to your creation is an absolute mess and a nightmare. The moves are just dumped into a giant list. There are no sub-lists or options to sort moves by type, and there are no options to filter the moves in any meaningful way, meaning you're just left to scroll through a move list that is hundreds of moves deep to find the ones that fit what you're trying to create. Lastly, In the Creator Wrestler mode, you can create your character's ring entrance. Typically in any wrestling game, this is where your character's personality begins to shine through, as you can assign music, stage movement, lights, filters, etc. All of that is present here, but in a very limited way, as each wrestler's entrance is only 7 seconds long and not a full walk down to the ring. Next up in the Creation Suite is the Create a Team option. This is just very lacking in its execution. There's no ability to create true factions due to the game limiting you to only 2 members per team. This is surprising and ironic considering that AEW, the promotion itself, is built around its various factions which they regularly promote. The fact that there is actually one 3-man faction in the game, the Death Triangle, made up of Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta Zero, which is uneditable, shows that from a technical aspect it is indeed possible. So there's no actual way to create the promotion's more noteworthy factions like the Blackpool Combat Club, which consists of Yuta Wheeler, Bryan Danielson, and Claudio Castagnoli, and Jon Moxley. There's no way to create a true faction which consists of the Elite that contains Matt and Nick Jackson, Kenny Omega, and Hangman Adam Page, and there's no way to create the newly minted CMFTR, which is CM Punk and FTR. You get the point. You're limited to creating tag teams only in this option. You can give the team a name and select from a wide selection of stock names which the announcer will announce, which ironically has the names of the factions that you cannot create in their entirety listed. Lastly, you can create the team's entrance and even assign them team-based moves. Lastly, in the Creation Suite is the ability to create an arena. This again is an extremely limited option in its execution. The customization options do not allow you to truly create different types of venues and arenas. At best, what you'll be able to make is different variations of the existing AEW sets already included in the game by mixing and matching different parts along with a handful of original prefabricated designs for ramps and video screen effects. You can also create rings with pre-existing AEW themed ring mats, turnbuckles, and ring aprons, as well as being limited to a few original yet prefabricated designs for the ring parts. You cannot even change the colors of the prefabricated designs, so you're locked into whatever color and pattern the design is by default. And the kicker for this extremely limited creation suite, you cannot share your creations online. That's right, there are no online stores for AEW Fight Forever for you to upload your creations to, so you are the only one who will be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor and creative talents unless you have people whom you can play with locally. This is highly unacceptable when other wrestling games, namely WWE 2K and Fire Pro Wrestling, enjoy more robust options with the options to share your wrestlers, rings, venues, sets, and even moves that you've created online and online stores for anyone to download and use. Next up in terms of features is a mode called Road to Elite. What this mode is AEW Fight Forever's career mode, which is effectively a multi-branching fictional retelling of the very first year of AEW's existence, told through various storylines. This is similar to WWF's No Mercy on the Nintendo 64, where there are various branching paths based on the decisions you make as well as the match results. You can take a wrestler, be it one of the ones on the default roster or one of your own creation, through a 1-year journey to become a top star in AEW. However, if you do decide to take an existing star through the career mode, you won't be able to level them up and assign perks that you will unlock throughout the course of the mode. Unique to this mode is having to manage your wrestler's health, energy, and overall well-being while earning money and upgrade points to upgrade your wrestler and unlock attire parts for the use in the game's Create a Wrestler mode. This is accomplished by using one of your designated turns before an event by participating in the game's minigames, working out, sightseeing in the various cities in which you will wrestle in, dining out, which is effectively an advertisement for the local flair of the current city that you're in, as these are indeed real-world locations. It's pretty fun to see a spot that you're familiar with pop up in the game that you have been to. Random encounters with other wrestlers can happen during these activities, which can lead to match opportunities with them or opportunities to team up with them. Injuries can also happen in matches, which will require you to use one of your turns to go to a hospital to get healed, or else you'll start a match with a broken or damaged body part. The options to use one of your turns to compete on AEW's other programming like AEW Dark and AEW Rampage is unlocked after achieving that milestone during the career mode. The mode's activities can become a bit repetitive after a while, and you'll find yourself skipping most of the dialogue in order to get through it, as the game boasts the same cutscenes for dining out, press conference, and workout activities, with occasionally a random encounter breaking up the sameness. To cap things off, in terms of the features, are the challenges and the in-game shop. The challenges are changed daily and weekly to allow you to earn in-game currency by completing certain objectives. Thankfully, these challenges do not ask anything ridiculous of the player. It's the normal challenges that venture into the more absurd in nature. You can tell that these are for the true tryhards and insanely devoted because they range from requiring the player to play a ridiculous amount of matches overall to playing 50 to 100 matches with each individual wrestler in order to obtain the reward for that particular challenge. The shop is where you spend your in-game currency to buy things like apparel parts to use on your created wrestlers, arena parts to use in your created arenas, and moves to add to an already extensive list of moves the game provides for your created wrestlers, entrance moves for wrestler entrances, and the ability to unlock wrestlers and secondary attire for some wrestler. Hopefully they decide to add more wrestlers to unlock this way instead of waiting for them to be added via a battle pass or a season pass. Now that we've spoken about what the game has to offer from features perspective, let's talk about how the game looks and how the game animates with its graphics. On the look side of things, the character models of the wrestlers are not going to confuse anyone that this is a simulation affair by any stretch. That is not to say that the character models are bad. They're simply not aiming to replicate the hyper-realistic look of what WWE 2K has to offer. If anything, I'd make the comparison that these character models are on the level of a more mature version of what exists in WWE 2K Battlegrounds. They're exaggerated in some places, while providing recognizable details that are unique to each wrestler, more caricature-like in their execution, look, and feel. As for the venues themselves, there really isn't any variety at all. All the matches take place in the same style of building, with the ability to change which set you use based on the AEW set pieces that are available from the launch. AEW Fight Forever comes off looking as a moderately sized independent promotion, as only a portion of the crowd in the venues are ever seen. You're not made to look like you're in a big arena or stadium, but rather a small gymnasium or a small concert hall that has this level of intimate surroundings. The animation in this game does leave a bit to be desired. It's a very mixed bag to say the least. You can clearly tell that this is running on a 23-year-old game engine due to how this game animates. There's a noticeable lack of transition animations and moves, and the character movement and locomotion isn't fluid all the time. The wrestlers have sort of a shuffle glide to them in some instances when they're in close proximity to each other that doesn't look like natural locomotion or movement. It comes across as very unnatural and disjointed in some instances. Also, there are plenty of collision detection issues, such as striking moves that seemingly pass through hurt boxes of characters without a hit detection. There's no way to interrupt the character's heavy striking animation with a grapple or strike. Character models tend to warp through the ropes, sometimes when rebounding off of them, or while standing on top of them in a top rope situation. In addition, there are times when wrestlers will slink into the mat when they impact it when a move is done to them, and wrestlers will at times warp through each other when attempting to grapple with each other. However, that's not to say it's bad at all times in terms of animation for this game. The moves themselves are animated very well when not impacted by collision detection issues. It's just that you can clearly see the age of this engine due to how stiffly some things animate, as well as the lack of transition animations. Things that weren't really noticeable in the year 2000 on a CRT television pushing 240p while outputting 24 frames per second, but are glaringly obvious on a smart television or computer monitor that is pushing 4K resolutions at 60 frames per second. This is pretty much unacceptable for a 3D wrestling game that exists in the year 2023. The game does not take advantage of the hardware it's running on in any way possible. Now let's get on to the presentation. Unfortunately, this is one of AEW Fight Forever's major glaring faults, but perhaps the lone bright spot is AEW Fight Forever does offer an insane amount of music in the initial package out of the box. Over 200 songs, with many belonging to wrestlers who are not in the game but are on the current roster, or who have appeared for the promotion at some point, have their music represented within this game. Even one-off appearances like Jake the Snake Roberts and Bret the Hitman Hart have their music faithfully placed in this game's music selection. You can take advantage of the game's jukebox playlist to add which music you want to hear throughout the course of navigating the menus, as well as during the matches. Another huge negative for the presentation of this game is during the wrestler entrances, or should I say lack thereof. This, in my opinion, is where you truly begin to get drawn into the spectacle of a wrestling match, but unfortunately here, only a 7-second snippet of the wrestler's theme music is played, combined with the wrestler doing their entrance animation on the stage area during that 7 seconds. This happens before cutting over to the next entrance or to the beginning of the match. This is highly unacceptable for a number of reasons. You can't even blame this on the limitation of the game's engine, because back in the year 2000, WWF WrestleMania 2000 on the Nintendo 64 had full entrances. So in addition to missing out on some excellent theme music, Chris Jericho's Judas is one of my favorites, they miss out on some gameplay opportunities like being able to attack a wrestler during their entrance, or even replicating one of the more amazing moments in all of wrestling, where the crowd sung the entirety of Chris Jericho's theme Judas a cappella during his ring entrance with a match with MJF. You also miss fully unique entrances like Jon Moxley's and the Blackpool Combat Club coming through the crowd. This limitation makes the player-controlled pyro effects and stage effects pointless because the camera is drawn way too close in to see them, nor do they last long when they're actually on screen able to be seen. A very big omission, for me at least, is the lack of commentary during matches. On-air talents such as Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, Taz, Excalibur, and William Regal do make appearances within this game, but only as cutscene and tutorial narration. To waste their talents and personalities in this way, in my opinion, is very unacceptable. I understand that Ukes were going for a very arcade-like feel with this game, but in my opinion, you could have at least the very basic of commentary be available with the option to turn it off if you so desire. In place of commentary is where you make the best use of that jukebox option playlist and put in the music you want to hear during the match, if you so desire to do so. The sound effects, in my opinion, are a mixed bag that range from spot on that coincide with the move and action being performed to head-scratchingly bad to where you have to ask yourself, why is that even in the game? Again, I understand that they were going for an arcade-like feel, but there's no consistency in the feel of the sounds. The crowd noises feel baked in, as there's no rhyme or reason as to when they'll start cheering, booing, or even chanting a wrestler's name. A wrestler could be losing badly and not even on the cusp of mounting a comeback or even beginning one, and the crowd will just randomly begin chanting that wrestler's name. It doesn't matter if the wrestler is a face or a heel, as designated within the game. No build up from soft to loud either, just 100% full on fever pitch screaming the wrestler's name, and they'll stop just as random in the same manner. There only seems to be 3 levels of crowd noise, which are soft, medium, and full fever cheering or booing, which again have no rhyme or reason as to when these will begin and does not coincide with the action that is happening in the ring most times. Lastly, we'll be focusing on the cameras. Unfortunately, dynamic camera angles and action shots are seldomly used in this game. So for much of the match, you'll be playing the action as viewed from the hard camera side of the audience facing the entrance rampway. Instant replays are only used when specialty or finisher moves are performed. However, one cool thing that you're able to do is when you're up on the stage area is slam the opponent into the video screen, nearly being able to replicate that infamous spot between Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon from their King of the Ring matchup in 2001. Now with that being said, what does this all mean? Who exactly is this game for? I'll tell you. This game is for those who enjoy wrestling games but are starved for an offering outside of the yearly offering by 2K Games and the WWE. This game is also for those who grew up in the Nintendo 64 era of wrestling games, those gamers who were between 30 to 45 who spent many a night and clocked plenty of hours playing WCW NWO Revenge, WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, and Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 with their friends on the couch beside them, controllers in hand, with competitive rivalries being matched up and challenged on a nightly basis. It's also for those who kept the torch of that era alive through playing those games on emulators, backed by the whole suite of mods that have been created over the last 15 years. Who this game isn't for. This game is not for those who do not have fond memories of the Aki Asimic era of Nintendo 64 wrestling games, or your introduction was the THQ and Yuke's offering of the SmackDown series of games on PlayStation. Those games live on in spirit in the WWE 2K series, so going from that to this is a very obvious step down in overall quality. This game is also not for someone expecting a full-on simulation style wrestling game. The first time you go into a match, you'll be highly disappointed with the dated control scheme, lack of options in terms of movement and attacks, and the overall action. This game is also not for anyone expecting a more robust offering in terms of match types, game modes, and online offerings. This game is pretty straightforward in its execution in terms of what it has to offer. When people say, this is the successor to WWF No Mercy, they literally mean that. So what does this all mean for you? Should you go out and buy this game? Yes, but not for $60 plus another $30 for the season pass. With the limitations and lack of options available in this game, there is no way that this game should cost $60, and they should be ashamed of themselves for asking for money for a season pass, or selling you wrestler packs for $5 when they are released. There is just way too much that needs to be added and fixed to justify paying any more than $40 for this game. Is the game fun? Yes, absolutely the game is fun. When you actually get into the actual end game and in-ring perspective, it is a fun game. Those memories of sitting on your couch with your friends until the insane hours of the morning with pizza, soda, and beer surrounding you will immediately come flooding back to you. If you can find a solid online community to play regular matches in it, you'll invest dozens of hours playing the game with the roster that currently exists in the package. However, once you stop playing the game is where the game falls apart and everything that isn't there becomes glaringly obvious. The game's paltry roster, lack of commentary, lack of complete entrances, extremely limited creation suite, and bare bones online and offline game modes will make you hope that THQ Nordic and Yuke's stay true to their word and consistently work to update the game, hopefully with more wrestlers, more modes, more match types, and quality of life fixes. Overall, this game, in my opinion, is a 6 out of 10. It's a solid first effort by THQ Nordic and Yuke's on behalf of AEW. There's a lot that needs to be worked on, and hopefully it is. If you can go out and get this game for less than $40, I recommend that you do. If you can't, I strongly advise waiting until you can, because you really aren't missing out on much with this game. Is it a worthy successor to the throne that Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 and No Mercy have occupied for 23 years? In some ways, yes, but in many ways, no. This game does some of the things better in terms of in-ring action than those games ever did. However, this game is severely lacking in many areas where the 23-year-old video games on the Nintendo 64 vastly outshine it. And that's pretty sad that a game that exists in 2023 is coming up short against 23-year-old Nintendo 64 games. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review for AEW Fight Forever. This has been David with a free play mode review. Please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And until next time, peace folks, I'm out.